There are a few questions that in general have to do with how you see the arts now, where they're going, what the most important trends are, where you position yourself in relation to all of that. So if you could just talk about those things a little bit.
I think the line, the borderline, let's say, the line will be how can you do art that is useful but is not being used. So I think that's a very important detail. And I think for me the distinction is when you do art not to make the system works better, but to try to bring a new system. Try to bring a situation where people in society or whatever area you're dealing with are trying to think beyond what exists and trying to see how that can be really implemented. So I think for me the danger of social art is trying to make society better instead of trying to create a new society.
Got it. Yeah. So, okay. You talked about the systems of the art world, or the structures in the art world. And CAA is very oriented towards enabling careers for people. You've taken a very kind of specific path in terms of developing your own career. I suspect it wasn't a matter of developing a long-term plan, but rather decisions along the way. But maybe it would be interesting for people to hear a little bit about that thought process for you.
I might not be the best person to give career advice because I've taken a lot of risks. But I think as an artist, which is different than an academic probably, as an artist, the one thing I have been focusing all my life is my work. So whatever is good for my work is what I'll do. Let's say for a while it was important I was in Cuba because that was good for the work. Sometimes it was good that I live outside of Cuba because I needed to open up a little bit my work. For some time it was good that I was teaching. And there was a point where I was in a very comfortable situation at the University of Chicago, great friends, great colleagues, and then I decided I wanted to be an artist and I needed to be free of all the other things and just go to the unknown and live. I mean, the one advice is never break any bridges. So I'm friends like with you for 20 years, even if I do my crazy stuff. But I think it's important also to be clear to people because the respect comes of like doing what you want, but let other people understand why you're doing it, instead of just I'll do it. So I think that's it's difficult, but I think it's the one thing. It's just focus on your work. Life is very short.
So my guess is that one way or another you're in a mentoring role for people, both young artists and people outside the arts, and maybe it's important to say a little bit about how your own role has evolved in terms of being in a different position.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You have more detail what you want to tell me?
Well, you're not formally teaching at this point, but you're still interacting a lot with younger artists, for example. And the project in Queens, you had a very specific kind of relationship to other participants.
I think you're right, and the reason I have this close relation with education is because I think political art is education. Like the biggest part of political art is educate. Not educate maybe in a very specific, like a classroom. Like maybe the way I see it through art is like you have no. Maybe no location, no specific syllabus, but you know what you want to get from that person in terms of like development, in terms of like trying to make that person the best they can be. And what I like about art as education as well is like you can have this ongoing communication that doesn't end in a semester, but it's actually a life. Like my best friends now are the former students. I had the Arte de Conducta and people at Queens from the immigrant movement. These are the people I call when I don't feel good, for example. And I think that's beautiful because it's a more maybe old-fashioned, maybe Greek from like old-fashioned situation with education is friendship instead of just lecturing. And I don't know. That's the model I'm looking for. Yeah. And also when I teach more formally in more formal situation, I always treat my student like my potential future colleagues. So I think that creates a different dynamic. And I always try, maybe even if I have the answers, to not have the answers, to make them have the answers, and have this dialogue with them where everybody's opinion is valuable, you know. So I think this is, and it's true, like at the end they are your colleagues. Like 3-4 years later you are in the same show together, and you don't have this kind of paternalistic approach. It's more like you have been friends already, you have been colleagues. And then you can create this situation outside of the classroom, which is very difficult in the art world to have, a situation where you can have real criticism. One of the things that for me is more damaging in the art world is that you don't have real criticism. That's one thing you can have in academia, for example, when you go back to school, that you have peers that tell you the truth, even if it's broken thinking or very crude or whatever, but you want that when you are outside. And I think that's what I have tried to create with my students or colleagues, young colleagues, when I teach. So. But we still do that. They're very intense when I ask them. I sometimes call them and ask their opinion about what I'm doing. It works. It's pretty nice. Yeah.
So maybe in a related vein, because the other thing I wanted you to talk about is your own process with the piece, and I think that it's some of the same things that you were just talking about in terms of the importance of being inside the conversation and having it develop. So it seems to me that lots of your major projects start with a relatively schematic idea or an image, and that and that it's only absolutely, and once it is kind of underway, and sometimes when it actually blows up in your face, that's where the heart of the piece is, that it's like in figuring it out for however long it takes. So I would really like for you to talk about what goes on for you as an artist, sort of learning in your own artistic process.
No, I think you're absolutely right. You know me for a long time, so you know what you're talking about. So I think it is true. I was born in Cuba, and I lived for a long time in a very schematic place where things are black and white, where life is being seen as these great statements that you cannot fit in life. It's like these big statements. And I think I kind of acquired that sense of like taking these things that can be absolute maybe, or contradictory, but even absolute, and try to figure it out, try to put that into motion in real life, in your everyday life. And this is where contradiction appear. This is where you have to start a process of negotiation, because it doesn't fit, so you have to negotiate. So I think this is where I'm learning. And I always, since I was a student in my first in 87, I always say that art for me is a process of learning. So it is for me a tool again by which I have understood the world. And it's interesting because sometimes I have people like wanted to commission me a piece, or asking me to do a piece about it, and I can't, because I only work about things I don't understand, things that I cannot figure it out. Like I'm a complex person like everybody else, and have many identities. There are some of these identities I don't need to talk about because I have resolute it as a person. There are other ones I'm trying still to figure it out, how to live with them or how to deal with them. So I think that's maybe, as you say, the core, that it looks very, and actually I can tell the ideas of my work in one line. I can reduce it to one line, but that line is so complicated that hopefully the work is not in one line. So, and I always try to, I always try to work in three levels at the same time, like the human, personal, emotional level in each of the work. The art history related situation where I even make a quote for previous artists, or I try to engage on a discussion about art itself. And the third level is the political one, because I can't do anything. I wish I could be doing art that is not political, but it's in my blood, so I can't do it. So I think this is kind of the mix.
So then let's shift to Tadlin's Whisper. Maybe even going all the way back to the Havana version, and the Biennale version, yeah. And then the one it's already 2 Decembers ago,
piece I did last year is called Jota Mexico. It's a hashtag I also demand. And but the kind of tropes or the kind of like a strategy I used to create that piece was retaking an older piece that already had problems, that already had to go through censorship, that already had a lot of conversation and friction. And of course, I think the most important part of that piece is flexibility, because I started with one idea and it came up as something else, so I had to be very flexible like a performance artist, and I think I was performing all the time. um, and I was performing in the sense I use a lot of elements that I use now in activist culture and in like our life on the net. So I think it was I could say my first internet piece in a way, because it was all about. It had two parts. It had an analogical and a digital section. The digital is the one people outside of Cuba saw, and the conversation that opened up. Hopefully, with that hopefully was not about me. It was being using me as a performer as a way to open up all the discussions. That was my goal. Discussion about how should we do art today, like what is the role of the artist in society, like all these questions I asked all my life, but kind of sharing that to people, and also hopefully that people understand what is the state of the situation in Cuba now, that is not the idyllic island that everybody wants to see anymore, but it's an island that is struggling with a power that wants to have control over even the imagination of the place. So I think this is one area. The other area is the analog, as I call it, because it's the one where the Cubans or people who like you came to Cuba saw and lived, in a different way, like skin to skin, And I think that's a more traditional performative situation. I mean, I say it's performative. I'm not saying I was lying. Everything was true, because the way I do performance is not a staging thing. It's just like highlighting what is happening so people can observe in a better position, Um,
Okay, so yeah. So that piece went in directions that nobody could have predicted, and it was difficult and traumatic. And I want to know how it changed things for you personally, and how it changed your work, as much as you can tell right now.
it changed me a lot. It changed me a lot, and I'm still dealing with stuff. It ended for me. It ended December this year, when I went back, and I was still interrogated for 2 hours before entering the country. So I was with the fear that I would not be able to get in. And when I came to the party of the artist in Havana, the same artist who negated me the year before and who didn't want to be related to me, and I came to the party, and seeing the reaction of people in the party for me was the end of the performance, where some people were like so ashamed of what they did, other people were pretending now it's okay to be friends, so let's try. So I think it was very interesting to see that behavior, and for me that was the end, because it was also a way for me to claim that I'm part of that group, they want it or not. So I think it's very hard. I've been working. I'm doing with Lynn Hirschman, another artist, a video about my sessions with a therapist, who is an expert of Stockholm syndrome, because I think it was very hard for me, because I had to navigate a lot of things that I thought they were settled on myself in regards to politics, my country, the relationship with power. And I think the hardest part was never forget that everybody's a human being. Even whatever they were doing to me, you have to remember they're human beings, and try to bring that to them, to remember you are a human being. So I think it was pretty intense. I think it made me a better person. The last interrogation session I had with Kenya, the official interrogator, and the other two, Javier, I said thank you to them, and they were very mad at me. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm a better person now. And that's good. And also thank you for opening a world of Cuba I haven't seen before, and I didn't believe it existed, actually. So I think that's, yeah. But it has at the same time it was super strong. But that's not different from performance artists who cut themselves or to have to be 3 years without doing something because that's the part of the piece. The sacrifice, let's say, of the piece is part of the performative you have to do. But at the same time, I'm very glad about that piece. I think it's my best piece. Not because more people knew about it. That's not what I pursue. It's more because I was able to be very clear about things and to challenge the view. That's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong. To challenge the view people have about Cuba, or at least make people think again. You know, what do they think about it and why? So I think it was good to show, and also I put in practice like some of my concepts, like political timing specific, behavior art, because the piece was done through the behavior of people. Like to the behavior, for example, somebody who was a friend of mine, now I don't think is my friend, who I had bruises because the police took me, and the first time that person saw me, it's an American person, like took my arms like this, like to try to shake it was true. I'm like, how can you doubt me? You know? And those kind of things are part of the piece. You know, like it's not like I should not take it personally, it's just like behavior art. So yeah.
So just a final question, because CAA is about the next generations. So words of wisdom to the young people.
Be honest, it always pays back. In a good way. Is that a good payback is good, no? Or is it a bad thing? No, payback is not good. How do you say be honest, it will come back in a good way always. No matter what you're risking. And also the other thing is like no matter what it looks at the moment that you're risking, it's worth it if it's not honest. So just risk it. You know. So that's okay. I don't know if in English is good, but okay. I hope people understand it, not the contrary. But yeah. No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.